Hi guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I am having a jam session with Robert Bosnak, and we are basically just going to be riffing back and forth, kind of discussing the science behind reality shifting and dreams and what it all means. As you guys all know, I am always asking questions. I'm always asking why, trying to understand my own experiences and get some explanations behind it and relate it to you guys as well, because I know I'm probably not the only one that's ever had these experiences. So we're going to get a little bit of information today from Robert about how this works, why this works, and a little bit of history as well, because this has been going on for over 3,000 years of research. So stay tuned and let's find out. Okay.
So,
Hi,
here
Robert.
we go. Hello, hi. Good to
How's it
see you.
going?
It's going very well. I very much enjoyed our introduction and glad to be seeing you here to jam a little bit and talk.
As am I. I'm very excited. We had some really cool discussions that I wanted to bring back and kind of get our viewers hearing as well, because I thought it was very insightful. And I know that a lot of people that are with me on my TikTok channel have a lot of the same questions that I do.
Great.
So, as just a little introduction, this is Robert Bosnak, and he is a Jungian psychoanalyst for over 40 years, focusing on reality shifting, dreaming, as well as alchemy. He's the past president of the International Association for the Study of Dreams, as well as the founder of the Santa Barbara Healing Sanctuary. And if there's anything else you'd like to add, I'd love to.
Yeah, basically on TikTok, I am an old friend of Dumbledore's. I am professor of alchemy at Hogwarts, and I teach the alchemical arts and sciences. And so we were going to be talking about the science of reality shifting, which is always very close to my heart.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Could you possibly give a little description about what alchemy is for anybody who doesn't know?
Well, alchemy is an art that has been practiced since maybe the 2,500 years ago, I would think. It started in Egypt with all the mummification. You know, mummification was basically to try and make a body last forever. So it was about eternal life. And so they used a lot of chemistry for that. So that was part of the beginning. And then it was the dyeing of wools and of materials to make all the different clothes. And then it was the work of the smith, metallurgy, and all of those slowly got together with medicine. And out of that, alchemy emerged, and it reached its peak in the 15th century. And so the alchemy that I'm most interested in is the alchemy of the 15th century. And what it does is it transforms things into something of higher value. In alchemy, that's called the transmutation from lead into gold. So like, for instance, in your own life, you try to gain value, to become a more valuable being. Many people think that they gain more value by gaining more valuables. That's like making a lot of money. So that is creating value. We're always interested in creating value. That is the basic foundation of alchemy, and alchemy tells you how to do that. And I think that that's fascinating.
Very cool. Thank you so much for that explanation. So I wanted to ask briefly about the
Wait,
work
are we
you
going to interview or are we going to talk?
both, but I just wanted to give a little
Okay,
background
good,
for
because
anybody
I am
listening for
very
like the
interested in
long.
your stuff. Yeah.
No, both of it. I just want
Okay,
to
good.
have
Good.
some background for people kind of just joining and getting to know you
Very
at this
good. Yeah.
moment, so they know like where you're coming from with this
Mhm.
info.
All right.
So I just wanted to ask a question first on your work with dreaming and reality shifting. So I know we had briefly discussed in the introductory meeting with us how it was the single self being an illusion and we live in a multiverse. So if you could explain a little bit about that or elaborate a little bit about that so people know where we're coming from.
Yes. So usually you think about yourself as one person, but when you dream, there are many people happening at the same time. It is just that you're identified with one person. So you get basically the storyteller. You basically get the one who's telling the dream story. That's the one we always hear about. And I call that habitual consciousness. So it's your habitual way of thinking about yourself, of thinking about your life. That's all part of one single perspective. But in a dream, there are many perspectives going on at the same time. So what I have developed over the last 50 years is to how to shift reality, to move away from this perspective of our habits into non-habitual states. Like, for instance, if you have a dream in which there's a dog running after you, then you can see it from the perspective of the one running away, but you can shift into the perspective of the dog and you get an entirely different world. So you get the of the dog and the running of the dog and all that kind of stuff. And then you can feel all that in your body and you feel into an entirely different body. So that is the reality shifting that I've been basically teaching for the last 50 years. Yeah.
So that's really extra fascinating that you say that too, in shifting your own consciousness into that perspective, because I've literally had some experiences, just as a background for anybody joining here that hasn't heard this. I have had many experiences where I've inherently just woken up in the wrong reality, which Robert had identified as a false awakening because this is a multiverse. So, one of them in which I had woken up in, I'm pretty sure it was not my body. Like, I'm pretty sure it was a significant others of mine at the time that I woke up in his body.
Yeah.
So, that was really interesting.
Yeah, well, what happens is that people wake up and suddenly find themselves as an animal. And in such a false awakening, we call it false awakening because you think that you have woken up from a dream and are now awake, but you woke up from a dream and now you're in another dream. And so you can move from dream to dream, and that for many people is very disorienting. It doesn't happen that often. Usually you wake up into actual waking, and then what we're doing is we help you to get back to this other reality. So sometimes it happens automatically, like what happened with you, that you were suddenly in the body of a man, of somebody else, and or somebody wakes up in the body of a fox, and then suddenly you see the world from fox. But you can also, if you dream about a fox, you can also start to move your reality by way of becoming like the fox. It's something that an actor would use. It's called mimicry, mimicking. You begin to mimic the fox and you begin to sense the fox. And as you begin to move like the fox, you become like the fox and you can smell like the fox. And the world becomes fox world. And so you have moved into another reality. And you told me something very interesting. You told me, and maybe you can tell me that again. You told me that you could feel how you would move out of your body you would feel experiences that happen in your body as you move out of your body. That's really important stuff.
Yes. So that's yeah, I can double back on that. So the way that that would happen, I had described it as kind of being pulled out of body.
Yeah.
So all of these were pretty much happening just unintentionally. I wasn't going in with the intention of this happening. Many times it was just pulling me. Sometimes I was shown messages and stuff, which is cool. I still just don't really know why it's happening that way. But one of them, one of the really prevalent feelings when that happens is I get like a very big like whooshing sound. It feels like as if there was like whoo, whoo, like I don't know how to explain that. Like I can feel the vibrations all around me, and it feels like energetic pins and needles all over my body. And sometimes I'll just literally blip right out if I'm just like not fighting it. If I just go with it, I'm like, all right, whatever, I just go right out. And then if I do fight it, it just gets more and more and more intense until like I kind of have to. And then sometimes it's my legs being levitated. It's weird.
Yeah. So I find that fascinating because it is a very special form of what happens to everybody as you are beginning to fall into sleep. It's called sleep onset. As you fall into sleep, you can sometimes, if you stay conscious in the process of falling asleep, you can actually begin to sense that your reality shifts and that your reality moves into another reality, so that you move from your body in bed, you suddenly are on a farm somewhere, walking around, and you can sometimes feel that movement out of your body in the body that's walking around on a farm. And what happens with you, what I find so interesting, is that you can actually feel it as vibrations in your body. Usually it happens very imperceptibly. So I found it very fascinating that you have that.
I also find it very fascinating, and I'm really excited that you have like some answers for it because I've been searching everywhere and then we were serendipitously connected. So I love that. Um, and in terms of dreams, because I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, well, these are just dreams or whatever. First, as a kid, I had a lot of stuff like this still happening, and I still do now. But even as a kid, I knew that when we were dreaming, it wasn't just like a fictitious thing going on in our mind. Like I knew we were going somewhere.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Well, that's the experience. See, um, what I'm interested in is experience, what you experience. And from the point of view of experience, a dream is a real event because you're somewhere, you know that you're awake. You don't think you're awake, you know that you're awake in a dream, right? Every dream, you know that you're awake and that you're walking somewhere and that this is absolute reality around you, surrounding you from all sides. So experientially, a dream is entirely real. And then when we wake up, we call it a dream. But we're no longer in the dream. While we're in the dream, it is absolutely real. And it's not just a dream, it's a place where you are and where things happen to you. And then if it's very scary and you wake up from it, you say, oh, thank God it's just a dream, because then you can put a distance between yourself and these events. But if you don't put a distance between yourself and the events, then it's a real experience that you've participated in and that you can get back to. See, that's what we can do. We can flash back into the dream so that you're back into that dreaming environment, which is like you and your friends when you do with reality shifting. You are moving back into another reality. That we can do by moving back into the dream. It's basically a flashback. What you do is you flash back to Hogwarts. I don't know if you do, but many people flash back to Hogwarts and suddenly they're in the body of Draco Malfoy. And they begin to see the world from that perspective. That's what we do with dreaming as well. And it's not
Okay.
just a dream, it's real.
I definitely agree. And I've always had that curiosity ever since I was a child, and I had been researching stuff like this. And now I had started to find answers. So that's why I'm here now. But I had always wondered, I guess, about that aspect because I know, you can measure brain waves and REM sleep and all of these different things. But I guess the tie between our consciousness and the dream, so to speak.
Well, our brain cannot differentiate between waking and dreaming. So for our brain, it's all the same. And that's why it's very difficult when you become lucid. So when you suddenly realize in a dream, oh my God, this is a dream, and the reality of the dream stays the same. So you're now in a world that you know is being dreamed, that you're being dreamed, you know all this stuff. As you become lucid and your whole body is involved and everything about you is involved, then you begin to realize that this is a real world. And we can create something like that lucidity by consciously moving into it. And that's basically what I'm teaching, how to do that, how to get to Hogwarts. But I do it by way of dreaming.
I love that.
Yeah. And one of the differences is that what people usually use reality shifting for is for wish fulfillment, right? Going to Hogwarts, I want to be there. But you can also do it for getting more information, to become more aware, and not so much what you wish for, but really to explore. And I'm interested in exploration. And I've always been interested in exploration. Maybe that's why I'm wearing a hat, like Indiana Jones. I love to explore.
I love that. Thank you so much. So I was curious because I know that this is what you teach and everything, and you had mentioned essentially being able to mimic the behaviors and smelling like the fox and everything, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
So can you elaborate a little bit more on how to go into that reality shift for people that are interested in trying it?
Yes. Let's say that you that you have a very strong image of, let's say, Hogwarts. Let's start there because that's where I'm teaching. I'm teaching the alchemical arts as Professor Red Sulfur Saga. Let's imagine that you have a really good sense of what Hogwarts is, and you have a really good sense of, let's say, Draco Malfoy. And you know how he walks, and first you begin to notice how he walks and how he is in his body. And as you begin to sense with your body how he moves and the environment that he's in, and how it is dark over there and light over there, and how the stairs are over there, and how others are walking, and you begin to really absorb that whole reality and begin to sense your body like his body. So you begin to mime his presence, and you do that with very tiny little movements. You don't start to walk around the room because then you get into another state, but you feel it with very tiny micro movements. You feel his movements, and you begin to sense his shoulders, the way that his back moves. And as you begin to move like him, and you begin to sense what is he feeling at this moment. You begin to feel his feelings, and then slowly you get into what is called an identification. And once you're pulled into an identification, you're there. And you're in this environment. And now you can look around and you can see it again. So that would be a way to do it. It's a process that I call interior miming.
Okay.
Now,
Thank you.
I've heard several TikToks where people are doing something like lying in bed, spread eagle, or whatever it is. And can you say something about that? Because I hear lots of people do that. What do you
So
know about it?
So I don't know much about that. A lot of, like I had mentioned, a lot of actually pretty much every single time that I've had experiences like this, I didn't know that I was doing it. And it wasn't my intention to do this. So I'm interested in also learning how to control it. But I have seen people on TikTok discussing, for example, about reality shifting to Hogwarts for the scripting is something that they would do. They would basically write down like everything, they see in vivid detail, and they would get their brain assimilated with what they're going to be experiencing.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So that's how I've seen it explained, but I don't know much about like kind of
See,
being just
what is my
ready.
interest is, I told you, I teach at a medical school. I teach psychiatrists, and one of my students, a psychiatrist, was saying they are doing this thing on TikTok that you've always been talking about reality shifting. And I found that there are people that can do amazing things, and very similar to what I've been teaching, this scripting thing, right? Is exactly like what I'm talking about. You make it very precise. You have to get into very much detail. You have to know where the light is coming from. You have to sense how he's breathing. You have to feel how he's moving. Everything is by way of precision. Imagination is very precise. The more precisely you can imagine, the more you can get into an identification. So it's all about precision.
Beautiful. Thank you. And that's because our brain like can't differentiate between what is the dream and what's real, right? So
Yes.
it's yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and
all
and
just a
and
projection.
imagination. See, imagination works through particulars. The mind can abstract. Imagination cannot abstract. Imagination is always about particulars. Like I take dreaming as the example of imagination. That's where the imagination is pure, because you're walking around in a world that is entirely real, that you experience as entirely real, and it's pure imagination. So if you look at the way that imagination presents itself, it's always particular. It's always embodied. So when you're walking around in Hogwarts, you see the stairs over there, and they're fully embodied. They're fully present. So that's why my field is called embodied imagination. The imagination presents itself particular and embodied, and you help a person get back into that embodiment of imagination, that whatever you want to embody and be embodied by.
Okay, thank you for that. So I have a question with that. So as we were just discussing as an example, we can do Hogwarts or anything else like that, and you
Anything.
can shift into the perspective of a fox per se. So with my examples, I guess how when I wake up as these false awakenings, I used to have a lot of trouble with this when I was younger too. It was just something that happened to me,
Yeah.
and I would wake up in a false awakening and like it would be so real. I could feel my body, as we mentioned, like pinching myself didn't do anything because I
Didn't
was
do anything.
there.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah,
So
because yeah, go on, go on, go
I
on.
was just going to say, like, so I know there's probably a similarity, and we had discussed that that was like a parallel world or something because of the multiverse.
Yeah.
But is there a reason that this happens, or like what does it mean?
Um, well, you can give many explanations to it, and the explanations basically don't explain anything. Um, uh, you can say that something was like filed in the wrong cabinet, so you enter into a parallel world. Um, but the what really happens is that you have shifted reality automatically. So you have moved from this perspective in a dream to that perspective in a dream. And that is something because every perspective in a dream, um, you can um, you can move into. I say that like a dream or an imagination is an endlessly pixelated space in which each pixel can become a focus of perspective. So that when you walk in a dream with somebody and then you wake up in the body of the one you're walking with, then you're in a similar dream, but now you have moved into another perspective. And so what I would do with you is that I would go to that dream and first have you experience the first dream from the perspective of the dream Stephanie. And then I would help you to be in the perspective of the man that you're now identified with. Feel both these experiences, one after the other, and then have you hold both of them at the same time. As you can hold them at the same time, something new begins to happen, something that hasn't existed before. So that's how I would work it.
How can you hold them at the same time with that? Because I'm interested, and I guess the experience that I've had when I've woken up in that parallel version of me, it's it's really fascinating because it was me, but it was like I was in a very different level of consciousness, and I had a lot of the same things happening in my life of like people wise. Like I had identified, with my then significant other, and like it was interesting because it was like a whole other path that my present life isn't in, and I had never physically been in any of those circumstances, but yet I was like watching, like I was there. And it's hard when I come back here, I guess, because my emotions from that version of me then assimilate with this version of me, and
Yeah.
I'm very it's like confusing.
Yeah, yeah, because it's like when you're painting and you're mixing colors. If you just mix them like this, it can become very messy. But if you notice them next to each other, like for instance in Impressionist paintings, where there's one color here and one color there, and when they're next to each other, it creates a new color, even though they stay individual. So that's what I would do. I would help you to first feel you're now awake. Okay, you've awakened. You've now had a real awakening. And you're now in your waking body, in your waking environment. I will help you to feel what it is like emotionally to be in the Stephanie body and to feel these emotions and help you feel them deeply into your body until you anchor them in a particular place in your body. So let's say that in the Stephanie body, you can feel all these emotions that you're having and you anchor them in your stomach where you can feel them most. Then I help you get back into the body where you're identified with your significant other and move around in that body, which is a different body. where you walk differently, where you breathe differently, where you're actually a different person, and help you to feel that in his body, sense in his body where that is, that may be in his legs. And then I help you to feel those, his legs and your belly at the same time. Because then we hold both these states. We don't mix them up and they don't become mushy and messed up. We hold them both at the same time. And that's when a new thing begins to happen. And that's how you get new understanding. New understanding begins to dawn. Do you get that?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I'm very interested in, I'll have to definitely work on that because I have this happen quite often.
Okay.
It gets very messy, you're
You
right.
know what we can do at some point if you want to? I can do it with you on TikTok.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was gonna say we could even discuss now if you were interested, but um,
We can do it now. Yeah, but go on.
okay, so I'll circle back to that. So I guess just one interpretation, I guess it seems that the way to really do this and reality shift is to be able to literally empathize as somebody else, what it's really like to be in their shoes. That's what
Yeah.
it's kind of.
It goes a step further than empathy.
For
Empathy.
sure, but
Yeah,
it's like I feel like that would be like a prerequisite almost.
absolutely. Yes. Yes. The step further that it goes is this miming thing. It's like you empathically look at the man that you have become, like in your case, your significant other. You empathically look at that way of being, and but then you begin to feel with your body what it is like to move like that, what it is like to feel like that, what the moods are like that he is in. You are now identified with him, right? And so, and that this is another body and he is in another world. And then as you feel both of these worlds, then at the same time, you get much more empathy for him. And he, I don't know what happens to him because he's not doing it. That's usually how things fall apart, right? You get the empathy and the other doesn't, and then suddenly it goes over.
Yeah.
But um, apparently he's important to you because you can identify with him, and so yeah, you begin to move into his world. It's great for relationships.
So
If you, yeah,
yeah, so that's where my question is, I guess, because it's like that's like an old significant other of mine, and like it's like I'm my conscious here mind is not there.
yeah,
Like it had been months, and then all of a sudden I was getting pulled into realities, like with when I was with him, and then I was in his body at one point, and
yeah.
it's just like it's keep happening, and I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, of course, I don't know why either.
Yeah.
Um, but I could imagine that there were moments in that relationship that are still very important to you, and that this is a way to get back to those moments that are important that you've left behind in a relationship. See, but one of the problems is that when a relationship ends, frequently what happens is that you lose a whole life because you are a particular way in a particular relationship. And when that ends, suddenly that whole part is gone. And so maybe your dreaming is still bringing back things that were of value in that relationship. Not that you have to go back to that relationship, but that there were things in that relationship, ways that were very particular to that moment and that are still valuable and are still exquisite and still can be explored.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to like conceptualize too because I'm not disagreeing. It's just I'm wondering because it's always specifically this one individual. You know what I mean? Like there's no to my conscious mind, there's no rhyme or reason why it's this one individual. There's no rhyme or reason why I've woken up in that person's body. There's no rhyme or reason like why I could literally feel it like and in waking state at one point I had even literally merged consciousnesses. Like I had
Uh-huh.
transmuted emotions for this person and
Mhm.
I didn't know that I was doing it. I didn't mean to do it. It just kind of happened and like I
Yeah.
could visually see the difference. So when before it happened, I could see everything crystal clear like a 4K HD video quality and then
Yeah. Yeah.
while it was happening it was like very grainy. It looked like a 1980s movie and I was like what's going on?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. I can get that. Um, uh, that from one perspective, that you are more used to a particular perspective, and then it would be like 4K, maybe 6K, 8K. But when you're in his perspective, you're not used to it. It's a fresh perspective. So then it is not as detailed. It's more grainy. That's how I would imagine it. Um, and but on the other hand, that grainy perspective, his perspective, may have ways of being in the body that are very different from your habitual ways of being in the body. And therefore you can learn a lot from that. But why it's always him, you tell me. I have no idea.
I got to do some more research now because I'm just like confused on that. But yes, it was literally how you described it. I definitely resonate with that, where it was just a different way of being in the body. It was weird because I was in my body, but like I was with his consciousness. I don't know how that makes sense, but it was weird. So I have those lapses, I guess, in consciousness, and like waking up in those parallel versions of myself as well. And that happens,
Well,
a
that would be very interesting for filmmaking, right? So that that if you from one perspective would shoot it in this 6K, and the other perspective you would shoot it grainy, and you have that back and forth, that would be a fantastic tool for filmmaking. So you can use these things very creatively. You can use them for your art. You can use them for writing, or for, as you do, you're creating a theory of consciousness or a theory of reality, aren't you?
Yes, I definitely am. And it's related to this as well.
Yeah. And so, yeah, you always have to start, and I think you're absolutely right. You start with your own experiences, because so as I said, I am a student of experience, and that's called phenomenology. So I'm a phenomenologist. It's a very expensive name of somebody who's really interested in the science of experience. That's why we're talking about the science of reality shifting. There's something else that I didn't say, but in alchemy, the central character in alchemy is Hermes, or Mercurius. And Mercurius is a shapeshifter. That's what he does. That's what he does for a living. He is a god that constantly shifts shape. And so therefore he can be a messenger between the different states. And because in one state he's like this, and in another state he's like that. So he constantly shifts shape. So the ability to shift shape, the ability to shift reality, is a fundamentally mercurial ability. And that's why in alchemy it's very important, because what the alchemist does is the alchemist can shift into the perspective of the metal. So if the alchemist is working with iron, then he can shift, or she can shift into the perspective of the iron itself, because the iron is alive. Everything around you in alchemy is alive. So you can participate in it, and you can experience it. And for instance, iron is in alchemy is seen to be the seed of the planet Mars. And the planet Mars is about war, and about swords, and about guns. And so that as the alchemist would be identified with the iron, the alchemist could feel that sense of power, of warfare, of fighting, and all that stuff is part of that inner life of the metal. And so the alchemist would participate in the inner life of the materials that she or he was working with.
That's really interesting too. And I just had like a flash in, I guess, of the movie The Matrix, where the little monk was like, there is no spoon. And like that's how the spoon was bending, because they were able to shift into that spoon.
Yes, correct.
And
Wow.
wow.
Yes. And so, and that's the way that the creative imagination, or the embodied imagination, works. That as you get into the reality of the spoon, you can feel how the tension of the spoon begins to reduce, and how the spoon begins to melt. You can feel that in imagination. And since we're in the matrix, and the matrix being actually imagination. So since we are in imagination, we can do all these things, but we have to learn them. Like Neo has to learn all this stuff. Neo cannot just do it. He's just super talented in doing it. And I could even imagine Keanu Reeves doing it. But so he's very talented in working with imagination and the fluidity of imagination and using this life in imagination to do things that physically are impossible, because he now knows he's in a lucid dream. He's become lucid. So he now knows that he's no longer in a physical reality. He is in what we call imaginal reality. And in this imaginal reality, things are possible. Like, for instance, in dreaming, frequently people can fly, and that you cannot do in physical reality. So he begins to move in the matrix according to the laws of imagination.
Okay. All right. That's really interesting. The laws of imagination. So I know we had discussed on the introductory call talking about ways to identify when you are in a dream state so that you can start doing this. And I know that one thing that you had mentioned was in waking state, in real reality here, you could jump like every 15 minutes and then you would form like a habit of jumping. And then in the dream sequence, you would then just continue doing that, but then the gravity would be different. So in every reality, is the fundamental law structure always different?
Um, Not necessarily. See, the people who started working on lucid dreams it's in the 19th century that people began to get very interested in, late 19th century. They were trying to find the differences. It's very difficult to find the differences. So in my world, this is something that I did, and what I do is these little moments of jumping to feel the gravity in this world, and then I begin to do it in another world, in the dream world, because I have habituated myself to making this tiny little jump in every 15 minutes. So I'm beginning to do that in my dreams as well. And then I notice, is this the same gravity? And for me, gravity shifts, and for other people maybe not. So you have to find out what does it for you. One of the things that how you can judge whether you're awake or dreaming is that you can look at something that is written down, and then you look away and you try to think of something else, and you look back and it's still the same. So I'm probably awake now. That is how you can check these things all the time. Or you can turn on a light switch on and off. Frequently, what happens if you do that and you're in a state of lucidity, and so you're in a dream state and you flick the light switch, nothing happens. So there are several of these tricks that are used by people who are frequently going into lucidity to find out whether you're dreaming or not. It's a very important thing, because if you are in a lucid dream and you make a mistake and you think that you are in a lucid dream and actually you're not, like, that's the end of Inception, right? That where she has to find out whether she is dreaming or whether she is in waking reality, because in waking reality she would fall to her death. If she's dreaming, she would not. And so it's a very important thing. We had this when I'm from the 60s, and people dropped a lot of acid. And then people would be on top of buildings and they would make the mistake that they think that they are in another reality, and then they would jump off the building. And since they are in physical reality, the outcome would be terrible. It's really important to know which reality you're in. Now I'm in the reality of Stephanie in my body, and now I'm in the reality of being in another body. But you have to be aware which reality you're in. That's the most important thing, to be aware which reality you're in. So when you go to Hogwarts, if somebody, one of your followers, is going to Hogwarts, be aware that you are in Hogwarts and that your physical body is somewhere else. Like when I was talking with Aboriginal medicine man, and he would become an eagle and fly to the center of the galaxy, he would know that his body, physical body, would still be in the swag, in his sleeping bag. But in his other body, he would move that way. And both these bodies are real, but he knows that he's now an eagle. He knows that now he can fly to the center of the galaxy. He knows that he can swoop down, take the patient on his back and take him to the center of the galaxy. He's aware of that. So you always have to be aware which reality you're in, because if you're not, you get into deep trouble. That's that's one thing that I want to warn everybody about. Know which reality you're in, because there are many realities and each reality has different laws. And if you try to do something in the reality that is governed by physical laws, and you think you are in a reality that is not governed by physical laws, like where you can fly, the dangers are quite dramatic. So
For sure.
Always know which reality you're in.
Okay, thank you. So I was going to actually ask about that too. So now I have two questions, but in regards to there being many realities, I also believe that as well. But could you elaborate a little bit more on, like, are there like infinite realities, or are there just like overlaps? How does that work?
So we have to talk about that. When I say that there are multiple realities, I only know that from experience, right? I am not talking metaphysics. I'm not even talking physics. I'm talking experience. And so let's say that in the olden days, these different realities were called gods, right? And so if you move into the reality of a god, you're in a different kind of reality. We now know this from Marvel Comics. And so it is when you are if you can move to different realities, and those are many different kind of divinities, you're in a multiverse. And if you look at the Hindu people have millions of gods. So that means that there are millions of different realities going on simultaneously. It depends who you ask. If you ask many of the scientists, especially conventional scientists, and not talking about quantum physicists, they will tell you that there's one single reality, and that is rational physical reality. And that because that's the only thing that they experience. And bless them, if they were not like that, we wouldn't be sitting here looking at our screens, and we wouldn't have created computers, we wouldn't have created airplanes, we wouldn't have created any of this. It is the ability to see that there's one single reality that you can change and where you can make things happen. So that is very, very important to have that experience, but it's also as important to have the experience that there are multiple realities. So it's about experience.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's actually a part of my theory as well, because I was like, there are so many different realities, and it seems that the way that people are able to do reality shifting, and I feel like the only, like, that prerequisite we were just discussing is being able to empathize from somebody else's point of view. Like, while I might believe this, I can absolutely see why you would think that. You know what I mean? Like, I can put myself in your shoes, literally.
Yes.
So I'm able to remove myself from my like egoic Stephanie form and like merge in with like you to see why you're, feeling that way, thinking that way.
Yeah, and there you can see how important this is, because it is important in a person's personal life. If you cannot get into the perspective of somebody else, you're a sorry kind of person, because you are always see people as others and strangers, and usually you will get into the way that you can either manipulate them or you feel manipulated by them. But if you cannot get into the perspective of somebody else, you can never get into a deep relationship. It's important politically because at this moment, people cannot get into the perspective of somebody else. If you look at the right wing and the left wing, they cannot get into each other's perspective because their empathy fails. And so you have to be able to walk in somebody else's shoes. That doesn't mean that you have to agree with them, but you can feel their experience.
Completely. And I think that's a really important point that you bring up too, where I think our world lacks a lot of empathy, where
Oh God,
there
yeah.
are so many people that just don't know how to empathize with somebody. Like,
And so
there's
this is a way that you can learn empathy. I totally agree.
totally, thank you. So my question, going back to where I was like, I have two questions now. One of them, so you mentioned the dangers of not knowing if you were in which reality.
Yeah.
For sure that. So I was going to ask, are there any other dangers to like reality shifting and shifting into other people's, realities, things like that?
Um, well, yes, I think that one of the there was a person on TikTok that I looked at who said that she had just spent 16 hours at Hogwarts. Um, so you have to see how much time are you going to give it, right? Because you also have to take care of this physical body in this physical world. You have to somehow be present in this physical world. That's where other physical beings are. And it can be very seductive to live in what I call the quasi-physical world, a world that presents itself as physical, but is not physical, the world you wake up from. And so think about how much time you want to spend on this, because it is super seductive. Imagination can suck you in. That's why I was interested in your saying you hear this whoosh sound, right? It's also a suction. You get sucked into this other world, and then it is very possible to just hang out there and keep hanging out there, and it's very exciting, and you never want to come back. There's that in there are Irish tales about people who were taken by the fairy, and they were just taken by the fairy um, uh, for one night, and they partied with the fairy, and they wake up, and it's 30 years later. Rip Van Winkle. Um, so you can really easily get seduced by spending all your time in that reality, and I would warn against that. So those are two things. You have to realize that that world is incredibly seductive, and it will suck you in, and it has an addictive quality in the same way that any drug has an addictive quality, and this can be used as a drug because it feels delicious. And then you don't spend any time anymore in the physical world, and that I would warn against. The other thing being, always know which reality you're in.
Those are really good points, and thank you for that. So that's actually something that I had kind of experienced when I was getting pulled into the astral. And I mean, it's literally, the way I described it is more vivid than real life, like the
Yes.
quasi physical. It
Yeah,
everything is
I call
so
it hyper
tangible.
real. It's hyper real.
Hyper real. Yeah,
Hyper real.
that's a good way to describe it. Yeah, it's just it's right there and it's
Mhm.
tangible, a lot of it, and it can get very confusing
Yeah.
when, discerning which reality
But
you're in.
you can also see how seductive it is to spend more time there, because it is hyper real. Therefore, it is super exciting. Everything becomes more exciting, and then this world is so dull. There was a person who worked with a colleague of mine, and he would spend all his time in this reality shifted world, and she got him out of that, and he's now back in the physical world. And she asked him, now, how do you feel now? He said, well, I'm no longer in that world, but this world here, it feels like linoleum, right? It's flat, it's boring. And the more time you are going to spend in this very exciting, hyper real world, the more boring this world becomes, and the more you don't want to go back. That's why it's important to go back and to make this world, this physical world, as exciting as the hyper real world that you spend your time in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. And I feel, in a way, almost those realities, the quasi physical realities that we were just discussing, almost could be seen as like a training ground for this real physical reality here.
Well, I don't know. See, because then you take that this physical reality is the most important only reality, and that everything is a training for this physical reality. I think that, yes, that is true. We know from dream studies that in dreaming you learn skills, you learn things so that you can apply them in the physical world. But that's, again, that then you become too extreme on the other end. Then you become too extreme on the end of the physical world. These worlds have meanings of their own. They are also a world unto themselves, and we can explore them, what they are like as a world unto themselves, so that it doesn't all gear to this physical world. That's how my profession began, right? I'm a psychoanalyst, and the first ancestor of psychoanalysis is Freud, Sigmund Freud, and his notion was, where id was, shall ego be, which means id is the totally free imagination, the dreaming imagination, the dreaming world, Hogwarts, everything that is the id. And his notion was, where id was, id, id, where id was, shall ego be. So that everything has to move into physical reality. Everything has to move out of that unconscious world of imagination into the world of physical reality. Now, that is very limiting. I think it's important that some of it moves from the imagination into the physical world. That's why you go on TikTok and why you got so many followers. It is because you're bringing things from the world of imagination through TikTok into the physical world. So it's really important, but it's not the only importance. These
Right.
worlds have a meaning to themselves.
Right. So I think it's, as you mentioned, important to kind of find that balance where you're not
Yes.
spending all your time in these quasi physical worlds, but you're also not spending, all of the, I mean, again, that's, an important thing in and of itself for the scientists who can, find
Yeah.
this classical reality and build all of these great things that even we're talking right now on. Um, but like I was kind of inferring the being able to learn from those dream states or quasi-physical states and bring in that imaginative quality, because I
Yes.
mean thoughts all create reality. So if
Mhm.
we're able to work with that in a subconscious way, we can also translate it here into this linoleum reality and make it a little spicier.
Yes. Um, you said something, thoughts create reality. I think it's a little different. I think, to me, it is perspectives create reality. So if you are looking at something from a particular perspective, you will see a particular reality. So if you are in a right-wing perspective in this American world, if you're in a right-wing perspective, you will see the world in a particular way. So it creates the reality that you're in. If you're in a left-wing perspective, you see a completely different world. And so your perspective determines what you see. So perspective creates reality.
I like the way that you worded that as well. So I was talking more about like the literal I'll have to go into it, I guess, with describing, for example, like this notebook. Like somebody thought up that we should have notebooks and
Yeah,
like it became a thing.
yeah.
So I definitely agree with you in the sense of perspective is literally the creation of how you view this reality. It is your belief system, it is your way of thinking. I'm actually writing a book on this literally right, like not this second, but right now as well, where it's getting out of the default belief system, because we're all raised and we're all brought upon this one, like you were taught the world exists this way. So then when you can like break down those barriers and shift perspective and be like, oh well, maybe I actually like it this way better, then you are really able to maneuver your physical reality in a way that best fits your life.
Absolutely. And I think that that is really important, especially for people in the younger ages, because you are so influenced by your parents. You're so influenced by the world around you, and that may not be the best world for you. And it may be that there are other forms of realities and other perspectives that are better for you, but you can't discover them because you're so locked into a single perspective. So the shifting, the ability to have your perspectives more fluid and be able to see more from different angles will be very expansive, and you can expand your awareness.
I love that. Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much for that, because that's also how I feel too in words, articulating it with the quasi physical realities that we're discussing too. So I guess I want to ask one more question too, in terms of these quasi physical realities being like dreams. What is a dream then? Because I know that dreams are real for sure, but like, what is a dream?
Um, well, again, I have to start with that um, I am a phenomenologist. So I study experience. And so I can only tell you what a dream is from the point of view of experience. Um, and from the point of view of experience, the dream is a real environment where you know that you're awake, and where everything around you appears entirely physical, or to you is entirely physical, and that you wake up from. So therefore, you know that it wasn't physical, but quasi-physical. That is the experiential definition of a dream. A dream is an environment. A dream is a place. And then as you have a dream, there is REM sleep going on, or there's other kind of sleeps going on. Dreaming is not just during REM. And things are happening in your brain. That doesn't mean that your brain is creating the dream. We do not know where dreams are created, because the brain can be a radio receiver, or the brain can be your computer, inside of which the hard drive where it all happens. We don't know. We only, from the point of view of experience, we know that you're somewhere and something happens there and you experience it as entirely real. That's all we really know about dreaming. And since my job has been to travel all over the world and ask people about their dreams, that's the only thing that everybody has in common about dreams. That is, I was somewhere and something happened. That to me is the definition of a dream. Being somewhere and something happens and then you wake up.
Thank you for that. That's really interesting. So I had like a thought on what dreams, I guess, kind of are. As I mentioned, when I was a kid, I always thought that we were going somewhere and like
Mhm.
doing something, because
Yeah.
I have always been very lucid in those dreams, especially when I was younger. I'm learning to turn it back on now. And a lot of it's just kind of, being pulled out of my body, the out of body
Oh,
experiences, and I can
mhm.
feel it all. Um, it's interesting. It feels like it's almost like we're going from this, world, this reality into another one.
Yes,
And it's like we are,
we are.
if you're excuse me, if you're familiar with Robert Monroe and the Monroe Institute,
Yeah.
how they were talking about out of body experiences, and I got to chat with Dr. Scott Taylor from the Monroe. Now he's on his own too, but they were talking about the silver cord connecting like your body, your physical body, with your consciousness and everything. So I was under the impression almost like our consciousness is going places, and I'm pretty sure that's
Well,
um
that in my language, that is to be aware which reality you're in, because the silver cord that connects you, you know somehow that there is a physical body there. And now you're moving in a quasi-physical realm. So you know that you're not in your physical body. So that is very similar. I think that that is the ability to stay connected. And that lucidity is the ability to stay connected, the ability to be simultaneously in the physical world and the imaginal world. And so I agree with that. But um, uh, I with astral traveling, I think that to me, all of that is the embodied imagination. So it's the way that with your body, you move through imagination. So there's a physical body, and you're usually identified with your physical body. That is an identification, but that identification can then move out of your physical body and begin to identify with other things, because the capacity to identify that creates identity. That's what we know. We are usually identified with our bodies. And that identity, that identification with your body can move away into other identifications, and then you move into another reality because your identification has shifted and you're in a different identity.
That makes sense. Thank you. You were just saying about how I had a question and I lost it just then. Sorry. Um, oh, with the astral travel kind of being that ability to stay like lucid, for example, the lucidity is being able to navigate and balance them. So I know you
Well,
had,
not to stay, to keep them connected.
okay, yeah, and
Keep
to
them
be aware
connected.
of which, which is
Yeah,
which.
yeah.
Sure, thank you for that. And so we had discussed on the introductory call in regards to some people, for example, I will become lucid in a dream state, and I'll know, oh, like I'm here, but this is a dream. But then as soon as I do that, I'll get like sucked back here and I won't be
Mhm.
able to stay there.
Yeah.
So do you have tips for anybody interested that might be going through this as well as to
Yes.
how to stay there?
Um, uh, I think that people should read up on lucid dreaming, right? This is lucid dreaming. So what people who do, I've done lucid dreaming, quite some of it, but it's not my specialty. So people who specialize in lucid dreaming and do it all the time, they say that in the beginning you get too excited because what lucid dreaming is incredibly exciting because you are in a world that is entirely real and you're dreaming it. I wrote about that in one of my books. I become lucid. I am walking in the around in the city where I went to university, and I become lucid and I realize I am dreaming. Everything around me is a dream. And I start to stamp my foot and I feel that the stones are real. I go to the bridge and I feel the side of the bridge and everything is real. And I become so excited. I'm in this hyper reality. It's entirely, totally real. And I know that I'm in a dream and there's a taxi coming up and I stop the taxi. I say, stop, stop, stop. And the taxi comes by and I said, and he rolls down his window. He looks at me and I said, this is a dream. You're in my dream. And the taxi driver looks at me, realizes that I'm completely crazy, rolls up his window and drives off. Because for the taxi driver, this is his world. It's not a dream. I, as a little tourist in his world, say that that his whole world is a dream. For him, it's not. For him, that's his world. So that made me realize that there are, for these people that populate, these quasi-physical beings that populate our world, they each live in their own world. And if you identified with them, if I could have identified with the cab driver, I could have seen that world from the point of view of that cab driver, and it would have been a completely different world than I was capable to see.
That's so fascinating too that you mentioned that, because that was actually one of the questions I think that I had forgotten to ask, because I'd seen that on TikTok where people, I've never had the experience to do that, but if you're able to chat with somebody in a dream, you're not supposed to tell them like, hey, this is a dream, like you're in a dream.
But you can tell them, they're like, but they will react as if you're entirely crazy, which for them you are.
Yeah. That's so fascinating too. And I've seen some, I guess it was one video on TikTok. I'll have to send it to you after, but it was somebody got really, really, really mad at the person that was like, you're like, this is a dream. And it became like some creature
Fight.
that morphed into something. And it was like a lot.
Yeah. Because we are going from the perspective that we create the dream. And that is total nonsense. We don't create the dream. We find ourselves in a dream. Like at this moment, you don't create this moment, right? You find yourself in this moment. And in the same way, it's with dreams. We find ourselves in a dream and we are being dreamed just as everybody else is being dreamed, because our physical body is lying in bed. But in our dream body, we are walking down a street. And so we are being dreamed walking down a street. So it is not that we are dreaming, but we are being dreamed. And that is something that lots of people have a lot of trouble with, because they think we are doing the dreaming. And in languages, you can see the difference. The most extreme is French, where they say, j'ai fait un rêve, which means I made a dream. And on the other hand, there is Japanese, yume o mimashita, is I saw a dream. So for the Japanese, you see a dream, the dream is there and you see it. For the French, you are in a dream and you created a dream. So it's a very different perspective. And there you can see the already profound difference of culture between Japanese culture and French culture. And so it's very interesting how people think about dreams.
That's super fascinating, and I've always been very interested in dreams. I definitely could chat with you for so much longer, and I guess we can save that for a second round with my other friend Stephanie, who also is very
Oh,
lucid
great.
in the dream states. If there's anything you want to add last minute or any questions or anything like that, I'd love to have that.
Um, well, for those of you who are interested in alchemy, I just wrote this whole series of novels that are out about the alchemical world. And so you can take a look at that at Amazon. But I think that I would love to continue talking. I'm very interested also in things that come up from people who see this, so that we throw out this conversation to a much larger group and see what kind of things come up and how people react and what kind of, yeah, and so that we make this a vast conversation, because it is a conversation that has gone on for 3,000 years and we should continue it.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I'm sure that everybody who comes across this will be very interested and have questions and want
Great.
to, I can even make like a question list for next time from anything that I get on
Great.
like
Oh, that's
TikTok or
wonderful.
YouTube.
Oh, wonderful. Let's do that.
Okay, beautiful.
So much fun.
This is awesome. Thank you so much for joining, for chatting, and sharing your wisdom with us. I know that I'm not the only one that's had these questions, so I'm sure everybody's going to be really excited to see.
Yes, well, I'm very excited that people are interested, because it's so exciting for me that there's a whole new generation coming up that's interested in this stuff. That's fascinating. It's wonderful. Yeah, I'm
Love
very
that.
happy.
It's fascinating to me that there's like studies of this, and there have been people that have been studying this for centuries and stuff. I feel that I've been looking for answers since I was young and nobody around me had answers. Everybody looked at me like I was crazy, and I was like, I know that I'm not crazy. What's going on here?
Yeah, no, it's been done for thousands of years.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining, and I'm very excited for next time, and we'll see you soon.
See you. Bye.